everyone, this is Jenna again, and today for our Craft Day Saturday we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're actually not going to physically be making anything with our hands, but instead we're going to be using our mind and our imagination to actually paint a picture that goes along with some of the stories that I'm going to be telling today. Now these stories have all come from different Native American legends, and so legends, of course, they have some truth in them and some storytelling kind of woven into it. So again, they are just stories, but they're stories about how different animals kind of came to be, how they came to look the way they are or do the things that they do, and this is what the Native Americans believed kind of happened in order to make the animals the way that they are. Now we're going to go over a couple of different animal stories today, some with our feathery friends, some with our reptile-y friends, and maybe even one of our furry friends as well. Now I'm going to link down in the description where each of the stories kind of starts, so that in case one sparks your interest more than another, you can just scroll down there and click the timestamp and it'll take you right to where that story starts. Now our first story today is going to be about how Vulture came to be the way that he is and how he looks the way that he is. Alright, here we go. Once upon a time, a long time ago, all of the animals were running around in the forest, and they started to look up at the sky because it got really, really hot, and they couldn't understand why it was getting so hot. And they looked up, and to their amazement, the sun was falling out of the sky. As the sun drew closer and closer to the earth, it started to wither up all of the plants, it started to boil and evaporate all of the water, and so all of the animals, they needed to figure out what to do in order to put the sun back up into the sky where it belonged. So they decided to hold a council, and they picked 3 animals to try their best to get the sun back up into the sky. The first animal to try was Possum. Possum did her best. She pushed and tugged, and it ended up just not getting back up into the sky where she wanted it to. And she just got so hot, so her little paws started to turn red and burn all of the fur off of her toes, and then eventually it was too much for her, and so she turned around to head back to Earth. And when she did that, the sun scorched her pretty bushy tail right off. And so now she's left with little naked paws and a naked tail from trying her best to get the sun back up into the sky. The next to try was Fox. Fox bit the sun and tried to yank the sun back up into the sky. It started to scorch his mouth so much, leaving his gums all black. And eventually it was too much for him to try to put the sun up into the sky as well. So he turned around and the sun singed the tip of his tail, leaving him with a bright white tail instead of all beautiful golden red color like it used to be. The animals were starting to get really nervous. They really hoped that their last choice and their favorite choice would end up putting the sun back up into the sky. And that person was Vulture. Now Vulture was admired by all the other birds and all the other animals because Vulture had the most beautiful feathers, covering him head to toe. They were gorgeous blues and greens and purples, the most beautiful bird that there was. And so he stepped up, he started to fly, he got the sun right on his shoulders and just started to push. And he pushed and he pushed and he flew higher and higher and got the sun higher and higher and higher into the sky. As he was pushing, of course, the sun's hot. The sun started to burn the feathers around his head. He still kept going. He kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And finally, as smoke is billowing down to the ground and he is pushing the sun higher and higher and higher, he finally puts the sun back up into the sky where it belonged. He flies back down to the ground, and all of the animals you would have thought would be excited. They're not. They took one look at Vulture, who now had a bare naked head from the sun burning his beautiful head feathers off, and whose beautiful blue and green and purple feathers were now singed and smoky and black. They were happy that the sun got back up into the sky, but they oftentimes then lost all respect for Vulture. And now Vulture continues to have his black feathers and kind of be more of a loner and only stick out with other vultures. The other birds don't really like him anymore much. However, if you're special enough to receive a gift from a vulture, such as this feather, if you look at it closely, you can still see the beautiful colors of the sun as it hits his feathers and the beautiful underside of the feathers. And you can see his beauty still, even though all the other animals think that he's kind of gross. The end. So our next story is going to be one of our reptile friends, and that is going to be how Snake lost her legs. And this, of course, is snake skin, but obviously you can see there aren't any legs on our snaky friend. Once upon a time, again, the sun is having some issues. So the sun ended up getting locked away by someone. And so, of course, without the sun in the sky, it's the exact opposite of our last story. And the plants couldn't grow, and it started raining, and it just started raining and raining, and it was nothing but gross wetness with no sun, and all the animals were starting to get very, very nervous that they were going to drown. And also, all of our reptile friends were very upset because they couldn't warm themselves up with the sun's rays anymore. And so they were starting to really become sluggish and slow and starting to not be able to function very well. So again, all of the animals, they got together and they were trying to figure out how they were going to get the sun back. Well, first of all, they had to figure out where sun was. So they sent out some of their best flyers, some birds, some mosquitoes, some flies, butterflies, and they all scoured the earth. Finally, the mosquitoes got back and they said, "We found the sun, we found the sun." And the sun was locked in a cage inside of a mountain. Well, they found the key that was in the tunnel next to the cave, but of course, little mosquitoes, they could fit down the tunnel, but they weren't strong enough to pull the key out of this tiny little tunnel. So all the animals started asking around, "Well, Mink, why don't you go down? Just take off your legs and go down the tunnel and then bring the key back out and then you can just put your legs back on." Mink was like, "No way am I taking off my nice legs. Nope, you're not gonna happen." Then they asked Lizard, just take your legs off and go on down the tunnel and get it. Lizard said, "No way, I'm not taking my legs off." Finally, there was Snake. And Snake actually used to have legs. She had 4 little tiny legs that stuck out from her body. And it made her pretty fast at running, especially once the sun heated her up. And so they all turned to Snake then and went, "Snake, you have to take your legs off. Please take your legs off and go into this tunnel and get the key so we can let the sun out." Snake was very reluctant, but then she started thinking. She's like, well, if we don't have the sun, I'm never going to be able to run anymore again anyway. So I guess I'll do it. And off in the corner, there was a little voice, and it said, "Snake, just go and find a spot to hide your legs. That way no one would be weirded out by it. Just go behind a tree and take them off, and then real quick slither in, slither out, unlock the sun, and then go back behind the tree and put your legs back on." That little voice was coming from Tadpole, who was down in a pond nearby. And so Snake looked at Tadpole and went, "You're right, I can do this. I'm gonna go behind this tree. Can you guard my legs for me?" Tadpole said, "Of course, I'll make sure that they stay nice and safe, and so once the sun is back up into the sky, you can come back and put your legs on." So she went behind the tree, and she peeled off her legs and sat them there, and she said, "Okay, Tadpole, they're right behind the tree." And Tadpole said, "Okay, here I am. I'm gonna sit and watch them." And so Snake slithered back out, slithered into the tunnel. She almost didn't fit, but she did. Because she took her legs off, she was just able to fit into the tunnel. She grabbed the key with her mouth, pulled it out, went into the cave, unlocked the sun, and the sun went back up into the sky. All of the animals were so happy. Once the animals dispersed, Snake snuck back over to the tree where she had left her legs. And they weren't there. Where were her legs? She also couldn't find Tadpole. Tadpole was nowhere to be seen, which is kind of weird because Tadpole was living right in that puddle. So where else could he have gone? So she was very upset. She started looking all over for her legs. She really did like her legs, and she would really like them back. Finally, she went and asked the sun if he had seen anything being way up into the sky. And the sun said, "Yes, I know who took your legs. Unfortunately, I can't get them back for you, but I can make sure that I heat you up as much as I can so that you'll be able to be very quick and be able to chase the person that took your legs." And she said, "Okay, that sounds good. Thank you so much for providing me your warmth." And he said, "Of course, anytime you need me, you come out into the open and I'll shine my rays down on you so that you can be just as quick as you were without your legs." And so that's why Snake doesn't have legs anymore, because she sacrificed her legs to be able to put the sun back up into the sky. But wait, where did her legs go? Well, eventually, Snake found Tadpole. Except Tadpole wasn't Tadpole anymore. Tadpole had turned into Frog. And so that's why there are quite a few snakes out there that when they start to get a little cold, they go and they lay out in the sun. And then that way they're super fast to be able to chase down Frog and try to eat him and get back at him for taking her legs. The end. Our next story, we'll go back to our feathery guys, is how the red-tailed hawk got his red tail. Look at this nice red tail feather, right? This is from one of our, from our old red-tailed hawk. She left us a feather for us. Shh. If you hear some banging, that's another thing that we're gonna get to. Don't worry, we'll get to that story. So once upon a time, there was an art competition in the forest, because you know it's not all doom and gloom. We want to make sure that we have, you know, some happy things too, right? Some happy stories. So this one doesn't have to do anything with the sun falling out of the sky. It's great. Okay. So once upon a time, all of the animals of the forest decided that they were going to have an art competition. So they decided a week from today, we're going to all present our artwork, and then everybody gets to vote on their favorite, and then that person gets some sort of big prize that they want. And so all the animals were super excited. They all went home and they started doing their crafts. You had Bear. Bear went home, grabbed a bunch of berries and started smashing them all over her paper. Oh, it was a beautiful berry smash splatter painting. She loved it. She couldn't wait to show everybody. Then you had some other animals like Vulture. Oh, can't forget about Vulture. He went home, he found some carrion, some dead things, and he took the blood and drew in ink with the dead animal's blood. Oh, he thought it was gorgeous. He also threw some guts on the canvas because he thought, that's beautiful. Well, then you had Frog. Frog decided, oh, I'm gonna take some mud and slather it on my canvas, and I'm gonna take some of this duckweed and sprinkle it on. All of the animals were so thrilled with all of their artwork that they came up with. So eventually, the week's end came. And there was one animal that still couldn't figure out what he was gonna do. He just couldn't come up with a good idea. So it was getting closer and closer and closer to the deadline. Finally, the day came. All of the animals were showing their artwork. Everybody thought, yeah, looks good. Of course, everybody individually loved their artwork, but no one could really agree on someone's that really stood out to them, that was deserving of the winner. So finally, they got around to Redtail, and they said, Redtail, did you make some artwork? We don't want to leave you out. If you made artwork, you have to show it to us. And the sun was setting on that day, and Redtail said, "Oh, wait, I do have some artwork. Let me go get it." So he flew, and all the animals watched him fly up into the sky. And he dipped his brown tail into the sun, dipped it, and then painted the most beautiful sunset that any of the animals had ever seen before. They all agreed that Redtail definitely did paint the most beautiful artwork. And so when asked what Redtail wanted as his prize, he looked down at his tail, which was of course all stained red from the sun, and he thought, "I think I want a red tail." And so he ended up getting to keep his beautiful red tail that shines even more red and beautiful up in the sun. The end. And that's how Redtail got his red tail. All right, another reptile story for you. And this story is all about how Turtle got her shell. Can you believe Turtle used to not have a shell? What? So once upon a time, there was a turtle who didn't have a shell. She was just kind of this squishy blob. And she lived only in the water because that's where she could hide. She could swim really fast and be able to hide from any predators. Well, one day she stuck her head up out of the water and she went, "Oh man, there's a really delicious berry bush over there. I think I'm gonna crawl out and try to eat the berry bush." So she craned her neck, looked around. She didn't see anyone. She crawled up onto the bank, crawled really slow over to the berry bush. She couldn't move very fast on land. She was almost to the bush when down the trail comes trotting along Fox. Oh no. She had nowhere to go. She couldn't run fast enough to get back into the water. Whatever was she going to do? Well, thankfully, there was a piece of tree bark. And of course, there's no tree bark right here. Well, there was a piece of tree bark that she was able to kind of scoot herself under. So she hid underneath of this tree bark. She pulled all of her head and her legs in. And she was really, really quiet underneath this tree bark. And eventually Fox went right past, didn't even notice her. Well, someone noticed Turtle doing this though, and that was the everything maker, who was in charge of making the animals how they should look and kind of granting them different wishes based on what they needed or what they wanted in order to survive. And so Turtle ended up saying, "I can't risk it. I can't go over to this berry bush. I have to go back into the water." So she slowly crawled back over into the water and went down in the water and was catching some fish to eat instead. Well, the everything maker called her over and he went, "Hey Turtle, I'll make you a deal." And she said, "What kind of deal are we talking about?" He said, "If you bring me up a really, really big fish that I can make as my meal tonight, I'll somehow make sure that you're protected from any predators, both in the water and on land." Ooh, she was very excited about this, and she thought, okay, I'll do it. Even though I want to eat that fish, I'll go down and get the big fish. So she swam down, she grabbed the big fish with her beak, and she brought it back up to the everything maker. True to his word, he picked up the blob of the turtle. He took 2 pieces of bark in his hands and he slapped them together on top of Turtle and then put Turtle down. And now what Turtle can do with her 2 pieces of bark that became her shell is this becomes her home. And so she can pull into her shell, into her home, whenever she feels scared or whenever Fox passes by. Now, she was a little skeptic about this at first, so she decided to test it out. She crawled up out of the water. She was still pretty slow on land, definitely not as fast as she was in the water. She started making her way over to that berry bush. That berry bush still had all the delicious berries on it. She got over there, so close. Who she see? Fox. Fox is coming down the trail. She real quick pulled into her shell and closed up her shell. And Fox trotted right on past. She looked just like a rock. He didn't even notice. And so she carefully looked out of her shell. She said, "Oh, it did work." She went over to that berry bush and she ate every single berry on that bush. And she is a very, very, very happy turtle. And that's why turtles now have shells. The end. All right. And now time for our last story, who I do have a very special guest for. So let me go ahead and bring her out real quick. This is usually everyone's favorite. Hello, you want to come out for our story time? Come on out. And she's like, I know you have some treats for me, right? Come on out. Come out. There we go. Oh yeah, get that apple. Yum, 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 yum. All right. So our last story is why the possum's tail is bare. Now, remember, we did go over our other story saying how her tail got burnt off when she went up into the sun, right? This story is a little bit different on how she lost her tail, okay? And she has some yummy treats here to eat while we go over the story about her. So Possum once had the most beautiful long bushy tail. She loved her tail. She would comb it every morning, and she would always sing about it and dance about it. Rabbit used to have a long bushy tail too, but unfortunately he lost his by accidentally getting stuck in a frozen lake. Uh-oh. Well, Rabbit was very jealous of Possum's tail, and so Rabbit decided to play a little trick on Possum. During a meeting, there was an awesome dance that was to be held, and all of the animals were invited to attend the dance. And it was Rabbit's job to spread the news. So when he went by Possum's place, he stopped to ask Possum, if she was going to come to the dance. And she said, "Oh, well, I'll go as long as I have the most special seat, because I have such a gorgeous, beautiful tail that I think everybody should be able to see it out on display." So Rabbit said, "Oh, definitely. I'll send someone to come and brush your tail out for you and make sure that your tail is beautiful and is on display for all to see." And so this pleased Possum very, very much. Rabbit ended up going to Cricket, who was an expert hair cutter, and he told Cricket to go the very next morning and attend to Possum's tail for the dance. And Rabbit told Cricket exactly how he wanted Possum's tails fixed and went on his way. Early the next morning, Cricket went out to Possum's place. He said he had come to, get Possum ready for the dance. And so Possum stretched herself out on the floor, shut her eyes. This was going to be a wonderful spa day. And kind of took a little nap while Cricket fixed her tail. Cricket combed out the tail and began to wrap a red string all the way around it in order to keep the tail nice and smooth until nighttime. But as he wound the string around Possum's tail, Cricket was clipping off her hair close to the roots. And Possum never knew it. She thought, oh, he's just wrapping it up so that it stays nice and straight for tonight and not frizzy. When it was time for the dance, Possum went to the house where the dance was to be held. And just as Rabbit had promised, the very, very best seat where everyone could see her was saved for Possum. Possum sat down and waited for her turn to dance. When her turn came, she pulled the string to loosen it up in order to, let her nice straight tail fur kind of flow out behind her, and stepped into the middle of the dance floor. The drummers began to drum, and Possum began to sing her beautiful song. And as she danced around the circle, she sang, Look at my beautiful tail. It's such a beautiful tail. See what a fine color it has. And the animal shouted again and again. And she started singing louder and louder. See how it sweeps the ground. And the animal shouted louder and louder. And Possum was so happy because she was the center of attention. She danced around and sang, see how fine the fur is. Everyone was laughing so long and so loud that Possum was like, wait a minute, are you laughing at me? I thought you were cheering me on. And so she stopped to look around to see what was the matter. She looked around the circle and realized they're laughing at me. Why? So she looked down on her body and looked down to see her beautiful tail, and there wasn't a single hair left on her beautiful tail. It was completely bare. She was so upset and embarrassed that she fell over onto the ground and fainted. Just like how possums play dead. And with a slight grin upon her face, as, you know, possums do to this day when they faint. Little bow smile. Rabbit was very happy that he got back at Possum, and now they both didn't have their big, long, beautiful tail as they once did. The end. And that's the story of how Possum came to have this tail right here, which is still very helpful for her for climbing, right? It's just a little bit more rat-like now. So thank you all very much. These were the stories that I wanted to share with you today. There are so many different Native American legends about different animals. I highly suggest to look some up, especially if you have a favorite animal, and learn the stories. I've been telling these stories for a long time to our different summer camp kids and our different program kids, and they absolutely love it. It's just a lot of fun to kind of sit and imagine, you know, paint your own picture in your brain about how this story is panning out. So until the next time, we'll be seeing ya. Bye-bye.